Hello, you've been listening to People Have the Power by Patti Smith. I awaken to the cry that the people have the power to redeem the work of fools. And that's what we're setting out to try to do this evening. Welcome everyone to what promises to be an exciting and informative panel discussion of the preservation issues being raised by the proposed Penn Area Development Project. I'm Lorna Nove, the Interim Executive Director of the Historic Districts Council. Tonight, you're going to hear words like segmentation, anticipatory demolition, catwag. Listen closely and you'll hear how complex this proposal is and why we and our colleagues and the community are determined to have Governor Hochul hit the pause button while this project, which will be larger than Hudson Yards, is reevaluated. Tonight is also a call to action. You will learn how to write to the governor and other elected officials, the Landmarks Commission, and how to sign a petition being sponsored by Human Scale. All comments must be submitted by February 22nd, so time is of the essence. Tonight's panel is truly an embarrassment of riches. We are honored to have some of the most articulate and informed partners in our effort to stop the plan. Our host is George Calderaro. George is a board member of several preservation organizations, including the Historic Districts Council, the 29th Street Neighborhood Association, the Friends of the Upper East Side Historic District, the Art Deco Society of New York, and the Victorian Society of New York. He is also the founding director of the Tin Pan Alley American Popular Music Project. George, I don't know how you find the time to do it, and you do it all so well. Layla Law-Gisiko is chair of Community Board Number 5's Landmarks Committee, and she is a candidate for the New York State Assembly District 75. Brad Vogel is a member of the City Club of New York's Preservation Committee. Brad also wears various hats. He's an attorney and a preservationist. He's been active in multiple citywide fights against misguided land use actions, including the Gowanus and Governor's Island rezonings. Seri Worden is the senior field director of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, providing on-the-ground expertise for the national organization and leading such high-profile and wonderful projects, including the Tidal Basin Ideas Lab and the Historic Neighborhoods of Philadelphia. She has nearly 20 years of expertise in historic preservation, urban planning, and not-for-profit leadership. After the panel discussion, we will open the meeting up to a Q&A period, so please use the Q&A button on your screen to enter your questions. My colleague, Michelle Arbalou, will be calling on you toward the end of the event. So thank you everyone for coming and joining us for this very important campaign. And I'd now like to hand the virtual reins over to George.
Thank you, Lorna. As Lorna noted, I am an HDC advisor and representative of the 29th Street Neighborhood Association and the Victorian Society on the Empire Station Coalition, a broad-based collection of a dozen community groups, which includes the Historic Districts Council, the City Club of New York, Save Chelsea, Untap New York, and the Alliance for a Human Scale City, among others. The coalition formed a year ago in response to and opposition to Governor Cuomo's and his Empire Development Corporation's proposed, quote, then called Empire Station District Complex, which will bulldoze the neighborhood surrounding Penn Station, but not the despised Penn Station or Madison Square Garden. I will briefly attempt to summarize the situation before passing the mic to the esteemed panel. The Cuomo, now Hochul plan to demolish 9 blocks of Midtown Manhattan around Penn Station will create a Vornado campus or Penn District, depending on the day or week we're talking about, of 10 super tall buildings with 17 million square feet of unneeded Class A office space. evict 2,370 residents and 1,300 businesses, as well as demolishing over 40 historic buildings, including National Register eligible, LPC eligible buildings in the area. Whatever the Economic Development Corporation are calling it today, this is no more than a giveaway from corrupt, disgraced Cuomo to his major donor, Vornado Realty Trust, the largest developer in the city, which has given him and now Kathy Hochul hundreds of thousands of dollars. Very recently, and this might be breaking news, very recently, there have been important positive steps in opposition to this travesty. This week, New York Senators Liz Krueger and Brad Hoylman wrote an op-ed in the Daily News calling on the Senate to join the New York City Planning Commission and, quote, put the brakes on this boondoggle, decrying the retrograde speculative finances of this taxpayer-funded land grab, as well as the review processes that are being pushed aside with Robert Moses-era tactics like declaring an area blighted, taking it by eminent domain, while bypassing required New York City, state, and federal land use reviews. None of us are advocating the status quo at Penn Station, but we do want a thoughtful plan that maximizes the opportunity. Governor Hochul's plan still combines 50s-style discredited urban renewal features and a dated cost-prohibitive approach to transit, which leaves Penn Station in the basement of Madison Square Garden, all for $40 billion. And I have to credit our colleague Sam Turvey at Rethink New York for these observations. The basement train station, which will share all the charm of today's Port Authority bus terminal, except that it will be underground. Everyone hates Penn Station, but lipstick on the pig work in and around the station is already taking place without Vornado further creating a truly blighted condition in our community with blocks-long vacant lots and construction for decades. This past Monday, the so-called public realm improvements that are pitched as a main benefit of the recently renamed Orwellian General Project Plan were presented by Vornado, not their co-applicant, the New York City Department of Transportation, to the New York City Public Design Commission, which approved it unanimously. Although they are relatively minor, these, quote, public realm improvements are the key selling points of the ESD Vornado proposal and include turning 33rd Street between 7th and 8th into a pedestrian plaza, which it already is for all intents and purposes, decorative painting, paving, bike lanes, a new subway entrance, and 5 trees. Even though these are major public amenities touted as part of the GPP, at the hearing, Vornado actually said that the so-called, quote, Plaza 33 has nothing to do with the GPP and has been in the works for 7 years. This segmentation of this massive project to incrementally demolish Midtown is just one example of the project's hubris and recklessness that will be discussed shortly. Finally, a major point for preservationists should be countering its assumptions that the demolition of the Hotel Pennsylvania is a fait accompli because Vornado owns it. For months, the formerly magnificent Hotel Pennsylvania has been closed, covered in massive electronic billboards, gutted, and its grand fixtures sold online, creating an actual blighted condition in the area. Why the demolition of the Pennsylvania Hotel and other potential landmarks designation are not being included as part of the whole project review, such as it is one of the many problematic issues, we think illegal issues that we will discuss tonight. To address these and other issues, we have a great panel that will kick off with Brad Vogel, discussing the many historic assets we're poised to lose, followed by Layla Law-Gisiko, who will address the community perspective, and finally Seri Worden, who will discuss the National Trust perspective on this pending debacle. So I turn this over to Brad.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, George. I'm going to share my screen. One moment here. And let's get right into it. As George mentioned, this is a multivariate plan. There are many aspects to this plan, but tonight I'm going to be focusing specifically on the historic preservation aspect of this, the actual historic resources that make up the site of this proposed Penn area plan, and why we should care, and more importantly, why we should act, because we still do in fact have time to act, and we have multiple ways that we can act to bring about a different result. So I'm here today also, I should specify, I'm part of the Empire Station Coalition, and I belong to that as part of the City Club of New York. But it's great to be working with so many partners, including and specifically HDC. Thanks for hosting tonight and making this forum possible. All right. This is just a quote from that's rather interesting, because it gets into the mindset that we are fighting against. This is a quote from the environmental impact statement for the proposed plan, and it calls the area around Penn Station a substandard and insanitary area in and around Penn Station. Well, this picture alone, I think, gives you a sampling of just how wrong that statement is in so many ways. And I think the more than 2,000 residents who live in this area might also beg to differ, that might be an oversimplification. And certainly for those of us who are preservationists, we know that this pretext of blight has often been thrown around as an excuse for power to be exerted over an area against its residents' wishes to bring about destruction. And when I say destruction, we are talking about the unmitigated significant adverse impacts of the proposed project. And that again is from the environmental impact statement. This is a picture of the interior of a church that we'll be talking about that is at direct risk of demolition if this project is approved. And now you're going to hear this a few times tonight, and I may end up sounding like a pull string doll, but I think it's worth it, because we do in the end have to act. Write down this email, because this is where you need to submit comments before the deadline at 5 p.m. on February 22nd. Penn Station Area at esd.ny.gov. And please tell 2 friends, tell a few more. All right, let's get situated here. This is an overview of the site area. The area dotted line of red shows you the whole footprint of this project. The sites in yellow are full blocks, or at least half blocks. We are talking about multiple buildings here. As George said, over 40 historic buildings at risk. And just to give you a situate, you've got Hotel Penn there at Site 7. You've got Macy's up on the upper right-hand corner, and Penn Station, Madison Square Garden right in the middle. This is a sense of the historic resources that are at risk. Now, again, you see that same area dotted in red. Those are the sites that are actually at risk of demolition. There are a number of them, but there are also a whole nother set of sites that are historic resources at risk of construction damage. This is from the environmental impact statement for this project. You can see those outside they are essentially the sites between the red line and the black line. So we are talking about a major project. Again, this goes back to a discredited notion that the sort of raise and clear style Robert Moses era approach is the right thing to do. So again, don't forget that email.
I did my
Penn Station Area at esd.ny.gov. Okay, let's move on to some of the specifics here. The Landmarks Preservation Commission was asked to look at the resources in this site. There are 3 buildings that are at direct risk of demolition if this plan goes through. They are the St. John the Baptist Roman Catholic Church from 1872, and I'll be getting to a little bit more on each of these. The Stewart Hotel, formerly Governor Clinton Hotel from 1929, and the Penn Station Service Building, which is also known as the Penn Station Power Plant from 1908. All right, the Stewart Hotel. So this was also formerly known as the Governor Clinton Hotel. This is an active operating hotel. A friend of mine from Sweden, when he saw on some of my social posts that this building was at risk, reached out immediately and said, I can't believe they're going to demolish my hotel. When he comes to the city on a regular basis, this is where he stays. This was by Murgatroyd and Ogden, with George B. Post, a name that you may have heard in architectural circles. But this building has significant details, as you can see from some of the pictures. And again, it's a functioning, very tall, but historic building. St. John the Baptist Roman Catholic Church, you saw an interior shot earlier. This is a picture looking up in the nave of that church. And then also some more of the exterior Gothic details. This is, again, an active parish and also the site of a shrine to Padre Pio. It also has a monastery or a former monastery in the back. We'll get to that a little bit more later. But again, these are buildings that typically you would think would give an agency pause before it launched plans to make a wholesale raising of a dense urban area. And the Penn Station Service Building. Now I want you to take a look because this is a building that was part of the old Penn Station complex. So the Penn Station that we lost in the 1960s, which remains to this day one of the most egregious losses in terms of our built environment. This is something that was part of that original complex, built a few years before, also built by McKim, Mead & White, the same architectural firm that built the old Penn Station that was, gigantic in scope and based in large part on the Roman baths of Caracalla. This building is still here. We still have a chance to save this building. You can see that it is a bit less ornate than the original Penn Station, but still in the classical vein. And you can see people down at the lower left for scale as they walk by. This is a significant building on 31st Street. Now, those three buildings were the buildings that LPC said are eligible as city landmarks. I am now going to tell you about two buildings that LPC has not deemed to be worthy of city landmark status or designation. And I am very curious as to why. This is Travesty alert number 1, the Gimbels Traverse, or the Gimbels Skybridge. And if you have ever walked out of the main entrance of the current Penn Station and headed east down 32nd Street, you will have seen this building rising magically overhead with its green copper patina. It is 3 stories high. It dates back to 1925. And it was by Shreve and Lamb. It connected Gimbels, the department store on one side, and a building across the street. We learned that this building was not originally included in the set of structures that the State Historic Preservation Office deemed eligible for the state and national registers. Later, after this process was underway, and I'm not sure if it's because of all the public outcry, but in October of 2021, another survey went out and did additional investigation. And lo and behold, in November of 2021, this structure was deemed eligible for the National Register by SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office. So again, it's hard to tell if this is why, but I like to think that all of the public outcry certainly did not hurt when it came to getting additional resources recognized. The question still remains though, what about LPC? What about the city landmarking process that could actually make a difference here? Another one that I'm sure you have heard about that has also repeatedly been deemed by the LPC not to be eligible somehow for city landmark status is the Hotel Pennsylvania. Built in 1919, this is again that famous firm of McKim, Mead & White. This is a massive building, and if we were to go off on the environmental impact of destroying a building of this scale, the embodied carbon and energy that is lost in that destruction, it's really crazy. And as George said, this building is currently being demolished. There is active work inside on the lower floors. There is scaffolding going up. Some of the lamps have started to disappear on the 32nd Street facade. And there's still no Section 106 process in place at the federal level. So I'm sure Seri Worden from the National Trust will get into that further, but that's a real concern. Okay, so what did LPC actually say? Because on January 6th, the Empire Station Coalition reached out to LPC and requested a meeting on all of these issues. On January 13th, LPC responded. and said, did not offer a meeting, did not offer any action, and said nothing about the city eligible landmarks at risk, those first three that we talked about. They did mention something about the Gimbels Sky Bridge because we had asked specifically about that. And they said, we note that it is an architectural feature of 100 West 33rd and therefore was assessed as part of the entire building. The building does not rise to the level of eligibility as a historic resource. So AKA, they aren't going to lift a finger. I find that troubling, shocking, and somewhat inexplicable given the nature of the Sky Bridge. And with Hotel Penn, they said it does not rise to the level of architectural significance necessary for consideration as a potential landmark. Now, notice that they say architectural significance. As Andrew Dolkart, a professor who's very well known as a preservationist, said, what this argument skips is that much of the effort to designate the hotel is its cultural significance, not just its architectural significance. And he said overall about LPC's response here, the government could easily have demolished buildings as they are valuable real estate, but they did not because it was a landmark. With this line of reasoning, LPC should never have designated the Custom House, for example, down on Lower Manhattan, Federal Hall, Castle Clinton, Hamilton Grange, the Farley and Bronx and Brooklyn post offices, etc. It's absurd. So there's a lot of work to do here to convince LPC to act. This is a little bit more of what they said, basically arguing that because this is a state-led project, they have a minor role in the process and don't have binding jurisdiction over federally or state-owned resources. Well, not all of the buildings that we discussed are federally or state-owned resources. And as to eminent domain, another reason they give for not designating, they could have an impact. If LPC designated buildings, perhaps the state would think twice about whether they actually needed some of these buildings for the project. Outraged? I know I am. I have a smile on my face right now, but let me tell you, learning about and experiencing the frustration of this process where historic resources that have been deemed city eligible for landmarking are not getting a hearing. They are not being calendared. They are not being designated by LPC. It's frustrating. So there are two people or two entities you should be contacting here. One, you should be submitting your comment before the 22nd to the Empire Station Development Corporation at that email. And the second email that's shown is the chair of LPC. Please reach out, please ask them to reconsider their decisions. And I'm going to go through this very quickly. There are some eligible city landmarks that are in that broader outer area that would be at risk of construction damage. There's a list of them here. I'm not going to show all the pictures. Here are some more of them. It's extensive. And state national register eligible. There are 3 that are at risk of demolition in addition to those I've already talked about, and 19 that are out there in that broader band at risk of indirect damage. Just a quick sampling for you. The Fairmont building, this is on 30th Street, and I know we have some residents of 30th Street, which is also known as Music Street. That's a whole nother ecosystem that many people are not fully aware of. But you should definitely check it out and learn more about that cultural aspect of this place, but also the residents of 30th Street and 8th Avenue who have really gotten out into the streets and worked to fight for their homes, fight against displacement. But this is one of the typical buildings that is eligible for the State and National Register. And this building was built in the 20s and was used in the fur trade. But you can see it has loving details that go beyond your average commercial building. This is the Penn Terminal building, another one that you might know and recognize if you're entering the Penn Station complex on the New Jersey Transit side of things. This too would be demolished under the plan. And as we go right along here, this is the Lithuanian Alliance of America building on the left, and some details of sculptural ornament up close at the Stewart Hotel. Just wanted to give you an example of things that are not even contemplated by the environmental impact statement that are the little details that also make up this neighborhood. This is part of an artistic installment on the back of the monastery at St. John the Baptist as well. So there's a lot to this site. There's a lot more than we can encompass in one presentation. As I said, Hotel Penn demolition underway. These are pictures to prove it from just the other day. Please, please tell 3 friends, tell 4, perhaps even tell 5, but please let them know that it can be a very brief email. That's all that's needed to help make a difference. It's time to act, and I thank you for your time. I look forward to hearing from Layla and from Seri as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Brad. Just a note on the Hotel Pennsylvania, which is, you can see to my left. When it was built in 1919, designed by McKim Mead White, as Brad said, it was the largest hotel in the world with 2,200 rooms on 22 floors, and they're all still there. So again, talking about the sustainability and the carbon footprint and the many decades it will take to, for the new buildings to compensate. I just wanted to put that in. Also in the chat, our wonderful volunteer, Susan Clark, has created a tip sheet, and I'll put that in. It's under Penn for All, How to Help, with a whole list of actions in addition to contacting the ESD. So now, without further ado, I'm happy to turn the Zoom over to Layla Law-Gisiko to talk about this project from Community Board 5's perspective. Thank you, Layla. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, George, and thank you, Historic Districts Council, for having me and for putting together this panel on a very, very important topic. So I'm Layla Law-Gisiko. I'm the chair of the Landmarks Committee of Community Board 5. I also chair the Land Use Committee of CB5. And we've been hard at work since this project was introduced in, actually it was announced in 2020 by Governor Cuomo and introduced as an actual proposal. Actually, guess when it was introduced? It was actually introduced on July 3rd of 2020, you know, like right before the July 4th weekend. You know, typical playbook to make sure that, you know, there's no community engagement. Well, you know, bad luck, we were actually paying attention because that's what we do. And we read through a draft scope of work that got us absolutely horrified. And at the time, the community engagement that was set up as, you know, the sort of like mandatory community engagement was so inadequate that they had decided to choose the appointee for Community Board 5 themselves. And they had appointed our district manager, who was wonderful, but actually he was retired. He was not even working for the board anymore. So, you know, we had to push really, really hard to get a more robust community engagement. That did happen over the summer of 2021. We actually forced ESD to engage in a series of meetings to provide, you know, more insight. It was a very difficult process, and we did not get all the information to the questions that we had, but we got a better sense of what this project entails. So Brad got really in depth on the historic fabric damage that this project would bear. I'm going to touch on quickly on a number of other points. The first one, and Brad touched on that already, as well as George. The plan actually would use eminent domain to condemn and demolish you know, roughly 3 city blocks. They're located to the south of Penn Station, and they basically would cause the displacement of thousands of residents, hundreds of businesses, and in the vicinity of 10,000 workers. Those are small businesses, and you know, especially at the storefront level, they are businesses that are very much tied to the sites that they occupy, their restaurants, and losing their home, their place of business would probably mean putting these businesses out of business. So, devastating impact for the residents, because the condemnation would likely be conducted under federal action. The level of protection for the residents would be minimal, totally grossly inadequate, and would leave thousands of tenants in a state of housing insecurity that is simply intolerable. The other aspect of this project that we got to learn through this series of meetings is that it would actually cause an override of the city zoning. So all the good provisions that exist in the zoning resolution currently, and that dictate how buildings can be built so that it mitigates their negative impact, would be entirely eliminated. Instead, this project would actually bring what they call design guidelines that basically dictate how the new buildings would be masked. And in essence, there's very, very little parameters. So basically, it's kind of like anything goes. To give you an example, these buildings would bring tremendous density to the area, not only built density, but also human density. And there's no adequate provision to enlarge the sidewalks. That's just one example to point to you how inadequate that is. The other aspect that really got the community very, very alarmed is that in the end we did reach out to civic groups, good government organizations. We wanted to make sure that we're not getting this knee-jerk reaction of, oh my God, we don't like development. Actually, Community Board 5 does support development. It's sound development is good for the city, but that kind of development we're dealing with is not. So what we found out is that actually all of the civic organizations that we dealt with are actually opposed to it. Transportation groups, environment groups, housing groups, good government groups, transportation groups, they're all opposed to it. And when you have this, broad coalition of people who are, representing different interests, and they're all in unison saying that the project is bad, that it is really a terrible, terrible plan. The part also that I would like to touch on is the alleged purpose of this plan, and what it is going to cause actually. So we were explained that the purpose of this plan is to build towers, because these towers are going to generate revenue, and this revenue is needed to do some upgrades to Penn Station itself. So what is important to note is that A, there is no Penn Station in this plan at all. Penn Station plan will be done by the MTA and maybe by Amtrak in a joint venture under a separate plan that we have not seen yet. So there is no Penn Station in this plan that is called Penn Station. The second thing that we learned is that in order for money to come in as, like generating revenue, what they call value capture, you basically have to have buildings going up. And then the real estate taxes that are generated by these buildings is the resource that is going to be used by Penn Station. So, you think, okay, maybe it works. Well, check again. The buildings at best will be built in 2038, but we need the money now. So what is going to happen is that the state through ESD is going to issue bonds, and these bonds are going to be guaranteed by the tax revenue. So we're going to issue bonds, and then the money that we're going to get from the bondholders is going to go to Penn Station, to the MTA to fix Penn Station. ESD is going to have to start paying interest on the bonds. Once again, we're still not receiving any revenue from the towers. We're going to have to then repay the principal on the bonds. we still don't have any revenue. So ESD basically is putting this on the credit card, but they don't have the money to actually pay the credit card. So what do? They borrow money, and they're going to borrow money. And that kind of money, those bridge loans are very expensive. How do we know that? We know that because this is exactly what happened with Hudson Yards. And Hudson Yards, we know today, with hindsight, it has cost already $2.3 billion to the taxpayers. So we're basically setting up a value capture framework that in essence is going to be a tremendous liability. So this is really a cause for grave alarm. And we were actually very pleased to see that our state senators, Liz Krueger, who is the chair of the Finance Committee, as well as Brad Holman, who is the senator for the district, actually penned an op-ed earlier this week, basically calling on the governor to, as they say, slam the brakes on this plan, because not only don't we need these towers, but on top of it, doing this framework is going to be tremendously costly to the city and to the state, and is going to be a terrible liability. So, this summarizes quickly some of the impacts that this horrendous plan is going to have on the district as well as on the state. And to echo what Brad and George have said already, call to action. Send an email to ESD. I'm sure that Brad can put up the slide again, or ESD, or maybe we can drop it in the chat box. Send an email and tell ESD that you oppose this plan. You can make your email as short or as long as you wish. But bringing critical mass and doing the surround sound that everybody understands at ESD, that there is tremendous opposition to this plan, is really, really critical. We need to make sure that there's no way anyone can claim at ESD or at the executive chamber that they didn't get the memo. Nobody wants this plan. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Layla. And it was interesting to note that in one of the two hearings that they had, there was an accident that the ESD had, so they had to do another hearing. But among the 245 speakers that I counted that went into the middle of the night, one of the ESD representatives actually said that the actual numbers on the cost will be worked out after the plan is approved, which was just shocking. And once again, I'll reiterate, it's like a telethon. In addition to sending the email, do look at the Pen for All link that Susan posted in the chat, because that's got direct email addresses and phone numbers of all the representatives, because quite frankly, we are, by sending an email to ESD, it's ESD's proposal and they are approving it. So it really is the chicken and in the hen house we have to do both, contact ESD and then all of your elected officials, including the city council, even though they're might not have any real oversight for some reason over this proposal. We do need to reach out to them and let them all know at this desperate time. So with that in mind, I'm delighted to turn the screen and the mic over to Seri Worden to give us the National Trust for Historic Preservation's thoughts and observations on the GPP. Thank you, Seri.
Yes. Thank you, George. Appreciate it. Yes, the National Trust has been paying very close attention to this major proposal. I've been working closely with my colleagues in the law department to really analyze the proposal and ensure that it is following federal preservation processes, which I think you can guess it is not. And as we all know, this is a highly complex project. We often say we need to whiteboard this out. There are so many agencies, so many reviews, so many aspects of this plan that it's very difficult for the public to understand what is being proposed here, what are the benefits and what are the consequences. And certainly the National Trust is concerned with the demolition of numerous historic resources, all of those that Brad mentioned, as well as impacting the view sheds to the Empire State Building, which I always want to note is a National Historic Landmark. So there are some major impacts going on here. Most of our concerns in our written testimony and spoken testimony have focused on the compliance or lack of compliance with the federal environmental review process. And there are a couple of aspects that we are really looking at closely here. So the first is segmentation. So the plan proposed by ESD and the draft environmental impact statement acknowledge federal transportation funding and approvals. So this will require review under Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, the National Environmental Policy Act, and likely Section 4F of the Department of Transportation Act. So currently the way the plan is being proposed, which Layla mentioned, it tends to segment the project. One is the revitalization area, which we're talking about more specifically today, and a second project, which is the reconstruction and expansion of Penn Station. However, these projects are clearly related and they must be reviewed and analyzed as a single project. ESD cannot segment out a portion of the project to circumvent the federal review process. And given the complexity of this project and the knowledge that there will be federal involvement, all of us advocates should insist that the federal review process be closely coordinated well in advance. This is really our opportunity to ensure we understand what this project will, how this project will impact our city. The second issue the National Trust is looking at here is called anticipatory demolition. The demolition of historic resources in the project area prior to conducting Section 106 review violates the National Historic Preservation Act. And if that is shown to happen via the courts, that could create a serious risk that federal funds and approvals would be rejected completely or delayed in the future. In other words, if it's shown that the demolition of Hotel Pennsylvania has happened in anticipation of not having to go through Section 106, the entire project could risk any and all federal funding and approvals. I will say that the National Trust believes that many of the project goals can be achieved through a much more thoughtful plan. There may be some narrowly targeted demolition to ensure rehabilitation of historic resources. And we are happy at the Trust to continue to collaborate with our wonderful local partners and preservation groups here in New York City. And we're all communicating, and all the bits of information that we get, we're sharing with each other. And we at the Trust will continue our role looking at these federal review process, and we'll continue to reach out to the various federal agencies in DC, such as the DOT and FRA, to ensure this coordinated review occurs.
Thank you, Seri. And I must note that with the petitions, the letters, the emails, which are essential, are our only tool in our quiver at the moment, because what could really stop this project is legal action. And quite frankly, all of our dozen organizations, we are all grassroots organizations. What I'm basically saying is this is going to be a telethon. We need $20,000 to engage a lawyer just out of the gate. It's a big nut, and we've talked about a GoFundMe campaign, but that's $5 and $10, and that's not in the 20, even 100. That's not in the league of what we need. So if you or anyone you know has access to funds, would be able to help any one of our organizations fund a lawyer, that would be great. We have been talking to lawyers on an ongoing basis, particularly the Coalition for Human Scale City. There are other, we're in consultation with lawyers, but we don't have the funds to engage them at this time. So please consider options in that area. Unless there's something else that the panelists would like to add to their comments, I'm going to pass this back to Lorna and Michelle from HDC to see if there are any questions.
Please enter your questions in the Q&A portion. As some of you are typing, let me just say that we will be posting a video of this evening's panel on our HDC YouTube channel next week. But please also go to our website, hdc.org. You'll see other links for other ways to communicate with the elected officials and the Landmarks Preservation Commission. You can also learn more about the HDC and what we've been doing for the past 52 years to help preserve the city that we love. So Michelle, do you see other messages or questions coming through?
So far, we've answered all the questions. I see that Brad is currently typing an answer to question. Brad, do you want to answer it live instead of typing?
Happy to do so. This is going out to Peter Trippy, who was asking about St. John the Baptist Church and to what extent various related associations or groups of people have been alerted about the threat to that church. And Peter, I know that the parish itself is certainly aware, and I know that the Archdiocese is aware. I am not certain to what extent any other organizations or Catholic groups have been contacted or made aware to spread the word. But you raised some great points in your question, and to the extent that you have connections and are able to activate any of those groups in support of the work to stop this project, please activate, I will say. Thank you for bringing up some of those possible avenues.
And I'll also add that our wonderful volunteer, Susan Clark, has created a social media campaign. So on any or most platforms, please use "Stop the Vornado Tornado" in your messages, because we really need to create a groundswell.
George, I also see that there's a question for you and it's, where can legal donations be sent at this time?
I am going to offer the Historic Districts Council, or at least that question, because they are, the largest organization. Lorna, you can correct me, but I know there are various funds, but if you aren't able to take the funds, I'm sure that you could channel them. Is that fair to put you on the spot like that?
We don't really have that set up yet, and I think
well then I'll change that to let me just do.
I'm literally passing the buck.
Well,
okay, no, you can pass it back to me, because also the Coalition for Human Scale City. They have a legal action fund, and they have been collecting money. This is, if you go to Penn for All, this is a preview of what you're going to be going to. This is the action plan, and you can see it's quite specific and well done, exactly who you should contact in addition to contact the ESD. But on this site, the Coalition for Human Scale City, they have already received funding for a legal action fund. They've been helping with a small amounts. We're talking a few $1,000s, but they use them effectively. So they will be able to take funds as well. And I'm sure that HDC could put you in touch with Lynn Ellsworth and the Coalition for a Human Scale City, which is one of the, along with Rethink NYC and Sam Turvey, Lynn and the Coalition for a Human Scale City are the coordinators of the entire Empire Station Coalition. So human scale. .nyc, and you should be able to find that, or you can go to, once again, the free-for-all, Pen for All site, and that will take you to Human Scale, or you can just track me down and I'll put you in touch with them.
And you can always email HDC at hdc.org, and we will certainly direct you to the right sources. But also, I believe Michelle put in the chat a link to some sort of pre-written letters that you can use that we will then send off to all the concerned parties, so that if you don't feel like writing your own letter, we have a form that you can send on your behalf.
Also, we did get a note in the chat that it's not 2,300 residents, it's 2,300 apartments, each with an average of more than 2 people. So we stand corrected. It's even worse than we said and we thought. So I'm going to stop sharing now. I think you got it? Pen for All?
I'm adding the link into the chat one more time.
Any other questions?
You can see it.
Thank you.
We do have more questions. Someone is asking if Letitia James could be help in this situation.
So I can take this question, actually. There is actually a formal role for the Attorney General. She will be, her office will be asked to comment on the project, but it's an advisory role. That being said, it is always useful to have the eyes of an attorney set on a project like that, because it is a complicated process, and we are not lawyers, so we would not necessarily pick on some improprieties. The Attorney General may. And I think that it's always a good thing to have her and her office mobilized and focused on this issue. The one thing I would point out too is that the developer that is likely to most benefit from this project, Vornado, is a publicly traded company. So there's a number of regulatory frameworks that the company needs to abide by, and this is, and once again, they have a very robust compliance department, and I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that there's anything that is non-compliant, but nonetheless, I think that having the Attorney General's office take a look at the plan from this viewpoint, I think is valuable. Just on that point, I would also mention that a couple of days ago, during their Q4 earnings call, the chairman of Vornado announced that he is retiring the idea of creating a tracking stock. And a tracking stock is a financial trading instrument that basically separates the rest of the assets of the company and isolates one particular segment of the assets. And Vornado wanted to create a tracking stock specifically for the Penn campus. And they announced on Monday that they're retiring this idea. This is an indication that actually they may reconsider their position, but certainly it looks like our position is actually giving them pause, which is a good thing.
Also, I will add on the topic of elected officials to reach out to, Jumaane Williams had a press conference outside the Hotel Penn on Friday. So we are trying to make inroads, and it was very gratifying to have Senators Kruger and Hoylman, question the obviously unsatisfying finances. And in the conversation I had with Senator Hoylman just today, he said, where are the local elected officials? Well, you all are constituents of your local officials, and we would ask the same thing, applying pressure to your elected officials and also the elected officials specifically in this area. And they will most likely be on the Penn for All cheat sheet action plan as well.
And if I can add something quickly on that, after the plan, if the plan is approved by ESD, which, unless it is retired by the governor, it is very likely that it will be approved by ESD, given that all the directors are appointed by the governor. Then the next step is going to be a review by what is known as the PACB, and it stands for the Public Authorities Control Board, and it's an entity that is part of the governance of the state of New York. And there are basically 3 chairs of this committee, of this Public Authorities Control Board, that basically will have to finalize the ratification of the plan. It has to be a unanimous vote, and the makeup of this board is an appointee by the governor. So he is going to probably go with a plan, but it is also Senator Conray of Queens and Assembly Member Amy Paulin of Westchester, and she has a part of Harlem. They are going to be very critical in the approval process of this plan, and I would urge anyone and everyone to actually reach out to them. And George, we can, HDC, we can coordinate how to, get the contact for these elected officials, because they are going to be our last recourse.
Layla, I know you have to leave for another event in a few minutes.
That's correct.
Okay.
Busy season, primary use upon us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you to the Historic Districts Council and to the great panelists. It was really an honor to be with you tonight.
Thank you for all of your wonderful work, Layla. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
I just want to note real quick that I have copied all of the questions. I know we didn't get to many of them, so I will be contacting all of the panelists and trying to get all of their answers to the questions, and we'll do a follow-up email tomorrow.
So on that note, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Thank you, Seri. Thank you, Layla. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, George, for sharing with us your knowledge and your passion. Now we have a bit more insight into just how destructive and misguided this plan is. Thank you to Michelle for wrangling all the behind the scenes magic. And thank you to our audience at home or wherever you are. We hope you send those letters, sign that petition, continue to follow the news, continue to log on to our website and the websites of all of our partners. And this isn't the end of it. You're going to be hearing from us. We want to hear from you. And thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you. Stop the Vornado tornado.
Thank
and
you
I put on here the donation page for those of you who generously asked. This is the Alliance for Human Scale City page, and this is the donate page.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you for making tonight possible.
Thank you for everything. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.